This is the second of 3 videos for Rotary International documenting the results of an interactive workshop in which a simulated negotiation is presented from Pakistan's point of view. It is important to start with the first video to get a fuller understanding of the context. The players negotiated using Smartsettle Infinity, which sports a suite of 8 sophisticated algorithms that are designed for high-value formal negotiations. These algorithms guide collaborative parties to a better outcome in a shorter time. After a short orientation to these algorithms and the Smartsettle process, the parties proceeded to brainstorm the most important issues to the parties that they were representing. The goal of the negotiation was to restore peace to the region by resolving the conflict in Kashland, which is presented as an imaginary place very much like Kashmir. We imagined that India and Pakistan are being assisted by the World Bank, and disputed boundaries are already established, except around the Siachen Glacier. Here is a summary of the issues identified by the parties. The right column lists the relative importance of each issue to Pakistan. These preferences were determined by Pakistan's representatives in their own breakout room and kept private and confidential by the system. Pakistan's own assessment of the relative importance of the negotiation issues results in a scale where one satisfaction point is worth about $10 million. At that rate, the international contribution to Pakistan, with a range of $5 billion, would be worth 500 points if Pakistan's increase in satisfaction was linear. However, since the first billion is worth quite a bit more than the last billion, this entire issue has been assigned only 350 satisfaction points. The net zero emissions target date seems to be the second most important issue, but the water issues, taken together, are even more important. A key part of the Smartsettle process is the single negotiating framework, which is developed in collaborative discussions between all the parties. This document anticipates the parties negotiating all the issues together as a package. The single negotiating framework is essentially the final agreement, except for blanks that represent issues still to be negotiated. When the blanks are filled in with values negotiated for each issue, this document will become the final agreement to replace the existing Indus Waters Treaty. This is Pakistan's private point of view within Smartsettle Infinity. What Pakistan prefers on each issue is on the right-hand side. Pakistan has created some private reference packages. These packages have ratings that are determined by the relative importances and satisfaction functions assigned to the issues. The package named Status Quo represents the absolute minimum that Pakistan must achieve in this negotiation. Pakistan has arbitrarily set the rating for this package to 0 to make it easier to compare other packages with it. Having discussed the current status quo with the other parties, the values Pakistan chooses for this package are similar to India's status quo package. Let's see what that looks like in satisfaction space. This view of the negotiation after each party's preferences are well represented is known only to Smartsettle at the neutral site. Shown here are only 2 dimensions of that model, India versus Pakistan. Clearly, each party would not agree to anything worse than the status quo, so we've labeled that point as 0-0. In game theory, the status quo is also called the Nash Equilibrium, if it's a place where decision makers get stuck and have no incentive to move to a better place, even if that better place exists. The Nash Equilibrium is named after John Nash, who received a Nobel Prize in 1994 for work that he did in the 50s. Nash also said that those parties could get to a better place if they could somehow overcome the obstacles that keep them at the Nash Equilibrium. That better place is anywhere between the status quo and the efficiency frontier, in a region called the Zone of Possible Agreement. In practice, the more likely place that parties will end up is above their targets in a zone of likely agreement. The research behind Smartsettle has created a process called visual blind bidding that is designed to help collaborative parties move from the status quo to an outcome on the efficiency frontier that is the best possible solution that is satisfactory to all parties. Parties are encouraged to start the bargaining phase with optimistic proposals that represent somewhat more than they would consider fair, so that they still have some room to concede, but not so much more that the other party is offended. In this example, neither party would accept the other party's optimistic, because they are both outside the zone of possible agreement. But Smartsettle can generate suggestions that fall between the optimistic proposals. Some of these packages fall in the zone of possible agreement and may be acceptable to the parties. The suggestions most likely to become an agreement are the ones that are above the target levels. Parties reach a baseline agreement at the end of a session if they have all accepted the same package. In order to get beyond the baseline to a fair and efficient solution, Nash prescribed an algorithm called Maximize the Utility Product. The algorithm used by Smartsettle, called Maximize the Minimum Gain, was developed independently by Dr. Thiessen at Cornell University. This alternative for generating an improvement was actually preferred to Nash by the late Harvard professor emeritus Howard Reifer, who was a prominent expert on negotiation theory. Two of Reifer's students, Fisher and Jury, wrote the bestseller Getting to Yes, which actually inspired much of the Smartsettle process. This process works for almost any formal negotiation that you can imagine, between any number of parties. When we add the World Bank to the negotiation, the efficiency frontier becomes a surface, and the negotiation looks a whole lot more complicated, but each individual party's view does not change. Pakistan wants to create a new reference package, and starts with a new, not named package. By default, the flags for this new package appear first on the left-hand side. Pakistan drags the flags for each issue to create a new reference package. Notice how the rating of this package increases as we move the flags toward the end of the range that is preferred by Pakistan. The final rating is 267 points, or nearly $3 billion compared to the status quo. Pakistan plans to use this package later in the negotiations. Pakistan starts the bargaining process by submitting their optimistic proposal. When they do so, the neutral site releases the proposals from the other two parties, so that all three proposals can be compared. Two suggestions also appear, which must have been generated by the system at the request of another party, or created by them as masquerades. These proposals and suggestions appear on Smartsettle's virtual negotiating table, visible for all parties to see. Each package on the table has a satisfaction rating for each party. These ratings, which remain secret, allow each party to decide whether or not to accept a particular package. For Pakistan, India's proposal is even better than their planned concession, so they decide to accept it immediately. The yellow dot that appears is secret and not visible to the other parties. Pakistan ends Session 1, but no agreement is reached. In Session 2, the World Bank offers a visible concession. There is also a new visible proposal from India, but this one doesn't look like a concession to Pakistan. Pakistan also proposes their own concession, which becomes Package 9, and then takes a close look at Package 5, which is worth a little less than their concession, but much more than the status quo. Now Pakistan decides that the reference package that they made earlier will be their target, and names the package accordingly. This is how much Pakistan hopes to achieve in this negotiation. Since Package 5 is quite a bit better than this target, Pakistan secretly accepts it. Pakistan wants to also put their target on the table, but doesn't want to do that openly, so they create an anonymous proposal that becomes Package 10 and masquerades as a suggestion. The ability to create anonymous proposals enhances the level of trust that all parties have in the process. Since Pakistan would be quite happy with Package 10, they secretly accept it, and also accept all the other packages that are better than Package 10. In real life, before accepting any package, Pakistan would carefully inspect it and adjust their preference representation if necessary. When Pakistan ends Session 2, they are pleased to discover that they have reached a baseline that is actually much better than their target. After a search for hidden value, Smartsettle offers an improvement that is worth 349 points more than the status quo, and even 82 points better than their target. After all parties accept the improvement, it becomes their final agreement. Having already prepared a sound framework worthy of international treaty status, it is a simple matter of filling it in, and their negotiation is complete. Here we see the improvement compared to the baseline and the status quo. Earlier in the presentation, we estimated that 1 point was worth about $10 million. At that rate, the baseline and the improvement are each worth more than $3 billion to Pakistan compared to the status quo. There is one more video in this series that shows the negotiation from the World Bank's point of view. This video is available on the e-negotiation channel on YouTube. Thanks for watching.